Hello and welcome to our commentary on Lesson 8, the 8th week of our course on Reason in the Theology of St. Thomas. We have been studying, firstly, St. Thomas's logical works as the tools of reason. Last week, we began investigating the different categories of knowledge with St. Thomas's commentary on Boethius' De Trinitate, and we looked at the three different modes of knowing: natural science, mathematics, and metaphysics. Questions about just beginning, in a sense, to investigate the relation of faith and reason in the relation of metaphysical knowledge of God and separate substances with the knowledge that is given to us through the light of faith about God and creation. Now, right smack in the middle of the course, we have St. Thomas's great other Summa, the Summa Contra Gentiles, 4 books of which treat many of the same subject matter as in the Summa Theologia, but the audience for the SCG, Summa Contra Gentiles, is not training theology students at the University of Paris, but more of a kind of apologetic missionary training manual. In the introduction to one of the Anton Paget's translation here, in 4 volumes, he says, St. Thomas himself may very well have thought that the SCG was precisely the sort of work needed by Christian missionaries in Spain, face to face with the high intellectual culture of the Muslim world. Seen from this point of view, the SCG is a manual of apologetics against the intellectual picture of the universe created for the Western world by the translation of the writings of Aristotle and his followers into Latin in the course of the 12th and 13th centuries. In a large sense, therefore, the SCG is part of the Christian intellectual reaction against Arabian intellectual culture, and especially against Arabian Aristotelianism. So, with the new translations of Aristotle coming into Europe from Spain, St. Thomas reading these, what you have here is a real robust and integrated systematic treatment of the natural world, all the way up into some natural theology that Aristotle gives us. And the relation of this way of understanding the world to the knowledge, understanding that faith brings is, to say the least, extremely complicated matter. It's great to see this work and to read it now. This is the pinnacle of natural theology in the Western tradition we're getting in the Summa Contra Gentiles. 3 of the 4 books are written from the perspective of reason alone, and what reason can know about God as he is in himself, God as the creator of the world, and then God as the final cause of the world. Those are the 3 books respectively. The 4th book treats the incarnation and the inner life of the Trinity, and does so from the perspective of faith. But 3 out of the 4 books, again, are a masterwork of incredibly complex and dense and comprehensive natural theology. Natural theology isn't so big these days. Immediately after St. Thomas, you had the rise of nominalism and voluntarism, where reason's capacity to know much of anything was dismissed due to a sort of maybe over-exaggeration of the contingency of everything dependent on the will of an almighty God, so that universal essences, for instance, that have a kind of eternity to them, immutability to them, secondary causality works through them. That was seen as a holdover from pagan worldview, which didn't quite grasp the utter omnipotence and utter contingency and arbitrariness, you might say, of the structure of the world. Every individual existent is dependent in every way upon God's will. So to place between God's will and an individual existing thing some kind of universal immanent essence or form could be seen as a kind of pantheism even. So the nominalist movement, which then led eventually to empiricism and the scientific revolution, and also the death of a kind of robust metaphysics, especially seen in Kant, where metaphysics is relegated to a regulatory discipline that we have a desire to engage in, but tells us nothing of the actual world. It tells us only about our own concepts of understanding. So there's a lot going on there to where we are today. All these different movements that, as Michael Gillespie in his great book, The Theological Origins of Modernity, as well as Etienne Gilson discuss well, this sort of dialectical movement in the history of philosophy, beginning with the Franciscans in the 1300s, leads to not only the death of metaphysics, but also, because metaphysics culminates in natural theology, the end of natural theology. Of course, we can mention the Reformation and Luther, Calvin, and their, especially Luther's rejection of an Aristotelian synthesis with the Catholic faith. So anyway, it's great to read this text. Of course, we can only read a little bit of it in this course we have, but in the next few lectures, we'll focus on the Book 1, chapters 1 through 9 in the Summa Contra Gentiles, after which we'll take on some analogous questions and articles in the Summa Theologia. So stay tuned for the next parts of this lecture.